It's perfectly understandable for a buyer of a property to be concerned about dampness. It's also common for surveyors to recommend a buyer get a damp proofing company if dampness is found at the base of the wall. Damp proofing companies are there to sell a product, to provide a quote, and they will always say that dampness at the base of the wall is caused by rising damp. Why wouldn't they? It's sensible for the vendor to seek a second opinion from an independent damp surveyor not selling anything other than their service. I'm Simon. I'm an independent damp surveyor. I'm RICS accredited as an expert witness. I visited many properties where Kenwood has provided a quote, and not once have I found rising damp there. There's always another cause. A leak in the subfloor, maybe condensation, some penetrating damp, or hygroscopic salts. In this case, we got 3 of those issues, and I'll explain why as we go along, and I'll unravel the myth of rising damp at the end of the survey and point to some other surveys to look at. So the house was built around 1900 when obviously horses and carts and manure and so on were prevalent. It's the ground floor flat, in fact, more or less the centre of it. You can see the dark staining, you can see where the damp proofers have been. It's been at least twice before. And this describes the movement of hygroscopic salts. So they will settle at the level where the surface relative humidity is at 60% on average. According to the government website, there's no risk of groundwater. That's because groundwater is pumped out. Now there's, using a protimeter damp meter, you can see the meter readings are high at the base of the wall, they go low to normal levels, and then it's high around the ridge of the damp proofer's slurry. So it's been damp proofed in the past. That obviously, well, you wouldn't know this necessarily, but that increases heat loss, increasing the risk of condensation, and you get condensation trapped at the top of the damp proofing material. So this is an example of Kenwood's damp proofing recently. This is up to a much higher level, but it's the same type of issue, same sort of property. This one also had previously been damp proofed, and you can see they use something they call a rapid set, which is a low porosity plaster to hide the hygroscopic salts. So you can see on the outside, you can see that damp stain, that's hygroscopic salts, and you can see it's also had damp proofing treatment in the past with the chemical. But damp proof course, as this is purporting to put it in, makes no difference because the hygroscopic salts are above that level. They come from historic burning of coal and for animal feces, and you can see that it's vertical and horizontal in this case. Have a look at a video I produced and created for the Property Care Association. I've reported Kenwood on many occasions for misstating the dampness as rising damp in properties. So in here we can see around the chimney breast, obviously that's where the coal was being burnt, you can see the hygroscopic salts. And you can also see the high subfloor relative humidity compared to the inside dew point. You can see it's higher. So there is some extra vapor in the subfloor. I found that the front drain was blocked. I unblocked it during the survey. There's a slight gap in the plinth there. I also noticed that in the under the floor, the stopcock has a slight leak on it, but notice that the outside stopcock has no change in that internal analog dial. It's very sensitive. Now, in addition, the bathroom extractor fan was not working, and it was manual anyway, and the kitchen extractor fan doesn't duct out, and the dehumidifier is just insufficient. It needs to be 20 litres per day. So when we talk about the woodworm, we can see that there is woodworm above, but that's been stripped back to the tunnels. and therefore unlikely to be ongoing. There's also woodworm. You can also see the parasitic wood wasp, so you're unlikely to get ongoing woodworm, and there's no frass below the timber. But a quick squirt of permethrin, 10 pounds, you need to do it once a year for 3 years, will resolve the problem. And taking photos before and afterwards just to prove that it's not ongoing. So, in addition, you should note that the property's already had a prior damp-proof course as part of its construction. There's been additional injected chemicals, and yet there's dampness above the damp-proof course. Why? Because they come from hygroscopic salts, and hygroscopic salts will migrate through bricks to the equilibrium where it's close to but slightly above the specific relative humidity of 50% for calcium nitrate. So you'll find that you get this sort of Goldilocks zone above the around 60% relative humidity. At the ground, it will be close to 100% relative humidity for most of the time. It's going to dry down to the ground, a bit like a pair of jeans will do. So in summary, there are no major issues in this property. The hygroscopic salts just need to be covered with Zinza, an oil-based primer, or in a non-aqueous base insulation. The extractor fans need to be installed, and I would use a continuous flow bathroom extractor fan, and I would duct out the kitchen extractor fan. I would always have a 20 litre per day dehumidifier running, especially when the property is left vacant. The woodworm is easy to deal with, and I would get a plumber to check the leaking there, because of that slight rise in the humidity in the subfloor, which can cause rising damp-like symptoms. For the mold, you want to spray with HG anti-mold spray, rub down, clean away, and reduce the internal vapor, because it's only ever caused by excess vapor, which means that there is insufficient ventilation, which we know. I would not get rid of the past damp-proofing slurry to the front wall. So if you're the buyer or the seller of a property, or indeed a surveyor, and especially if you're associated with this particular property, then have a look at the damp proofers report. If it says we looked for rising damp, we found damp, without saying they found actual rising damp, and we recommend damp proofing treatment, then you should be firstly reporting them to their trade association, the Property Care Association, to the surveyor who recommended a contractor, to trading standards, the government, your local MP. They should be stopped from recommending rising damp proofing treatment when all they've done is found dampness at the base of the wall, which could come from condensation, it could come from a leak in the subfloor void, or indeed a leak above the floor level. It could come from hygroscopic salts. Have a look at these various surveys on the subject, and please do leave a comment and subscribe. Engage in the subject. We can't do it alone. We need everyone's involvement if we're going to stop the cycle of damp proofing treatment. The predecessor almost certainly had damp proofing treatment, and the one beforehand, and it will have come up in surveys. Have a look at this property that was treated by Kenwood. I believe it had 2 rounds of damp proofing treatment. Dampness returned. It cost, well, they were quoting 16,000 for more damp proofing treatment. It turned out that it was the extractor fan that was broken. I got them to change it, and now the property is fine. No cost at all to resolve the problem.